Call of Duty 3 has the distinction of being one of the few Call of Duty games to not be released for Microsoft Windows. It was developed by Treyarch and released for PlayStation 2, 3 and the Xbox and Xbox 360 in 2006 and 2007. God, that was a mouthful. Believe it or not, it's actually one of the best games in the World War II period of the entire series, and I would even go so far as to say it is one of the best shooting games on the PlayStation 3. Like other games in the series, COD 3 focuses around multiple campaigns for different countries. You've got the expected US and British campaign, with the types of character stereotypes typical of each nationality.
Guys, we got ourselves a tunnel here!
The more interesting campaigns are the Canadian and Polish campaigns. In the latter, you're part of a tank crew hunting down German tanks, eventually going after the Black Baron. Now this was a guy who actually existed in real life, and you get to play through a mission where he's hunted down and finally killed in a large-scale battle. There's a much bigger focus on the characters across all 4 of these campaigns, and some of the characters are genuinely likeable. The Poles easily steal the show here, but the British SAS troops and the French resistance have some great banter in the cinematics, and even the US and Canadian soldiers each have their own unique personalities.
Which one? Show the lieutenant some respect!
Who's this pissant?
At its most basic form, however, this is still a World War II shooting game. That means destroying MG nests, artillery guns, taking out snipers, defending your position from waves of enemy soldiers, and so forth. There's a few areas where you get to drive a jeep around a small French village, and during the Polish missions you get to control a tank as well. You hop on a turret gun or a mortar every now and then, and the majority of shooting is done through iron sights, in between hiding behind cover, waiting for your health to regenerate. It's not groundbreaking, it's not revolutionary, but it is still enjoyable. There is a whole heap of weapons modeled into the game as well. You've got the Sten submachine gun, the Thompson, the Springfield rifle, and what is possibly my favourite gun of all time, the M1 Garand. That satisfying ping sound this thing makes when you have to reload is just music to my ears. Now, Call of Duty 3 is a console exclusive, and it really does feel like it, but I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way. The visuals aren't amazing, but they are generally held at a steady frame rate. The amount of stuff happening at any one time is actually very impressive. You know, dozens of soldiers on screen, and tanks and explosions and all that kind of thing at once, and the consoles pull it off near effortlessly. The size of some of the missions also trumps those seen in even the prior PC games, which is very impressive. The environments aren't as varied as you'd like. Most of them take place in villages or countrysides, but they are laid out fairly well and give you a fair bit of choice in how you want to approach each objective. There's an auto-aim system as well that kind of locks onto an enemy when you go to iron sights. It will kind of snap onto them if you're aiming close enough, and it can make certain areas much easier. It only works from certain lengths though, which means you can't just hang back and let the auto-aim do the work for you. You've still got to get in there on the front line, you know, so to speak. It's hard to fault the sound and music, and like every single game in the series, the audio is absolutely stellar. Great weapon sound effects, a terrific cinematic score that kicks in at all the right moments. There's really a great amount of detail and polish put into this department, and I would have to really look for things to complain about here. One thing I will complain about is the forced 6-axis QuickTime events, planting explosives or getting into fistfights with German soldiers as an example. Now, the 6-axis is one of those ideas like Pepsi Clear or Windows NT that just never quite worked the way it was intended. I mean, has anyone ever honestly said, oh boy, I sure do wish this game had more 6-axis QuickTime events? No, I didn't think so. That's because they suck. I often end up just wiggling the controller like an idiot to get them done as fast as possible. Another thing I don't like is the controls for throwing back enemy grenades. You first have to pick the thing up, and then press the throw button again. It's needlessly cumbersome considering the window to throw the damn thing back is usually 2 or 3 seconds, and the same button to pick up the grenade is the same button as reloading or picking up nearby weapons. In practically every other game in the series, all you have to do is press a single button to do this. In terms of the AI, it's not brilliant, but it's not really dumb either. I mean, the enemies just often stand in one place and shoot at you until they have to reload. Sometimes they'll retreat or pop in and out from cover, but it's not that hard to deal with. Your teammates, on the other hand, are an outright nuisance. They're terrible at even taking on another soldier one-on-one, and their stupidity is only increased in numbers. Their favourite tactic is to stand in the middle of a doorway, often blocking you when you're trying to fall back after taking damage. It's a shame too, because it takes you out of the game when this kind of thing happens, and it just becomes irritating. What can be incredibly difficult is when you're bottlenecked and have to push down a linear path to move forward, through a tunnel or trenches for instance. It's at this point that the Germans seem to pick up some form of X-ray vision and marksmanship accuracy, as they peer around from corners sticking out by mere inches and yet firing at you with frustrating precision. There's an area near the end of the game I had to replay maybe 10 or so times because I just kept getting my ass handed to me by troops who could kill me in seconds whilst even blind firing. In the other COD games, checkpoints were fairly liberal, you could complete an objective and you're often given a checkpoint soon after. But COD 3 is a lot less forgiving and you can spend a good 10 or so minutes playing through a section only to die and be thrown all the way back. It just means you can't half-ass your way through some missions. But I can deal with these shortcomings for the most part. I mean, they're not deal breakers, they're just something that comes up every so often. The gameplay in general is polished enough and that's what matters most. Overall, to be honest, there are very few things worth complaining about with this game. The overall campaign is about standard length to finish, so you're looking at about 6 to 8 hours to complete, and there is a few unskippable cinematics which can be a pain in the ass, but by and large, this is a great entry in what has become one of the gaming industry's most notorious franchises. You really get a sense there's been a lot of love and attention put into this campaign, and it also marks the end of the World War II story arc for the series. People often attribute the COD series with bad games, but I think people often forget that the vast majority of games in this franchise are actually pretty damn good, especially older games like this. So if you've got a working PlayStation 3 or Xbox or whatever, then I can't think of a reason to not recommend it.
We're going to need more paint!
Later! Air support is arriving. We're pushing into town. The hunt is on. Ride, Bohater!